crash in Beaver County. Some airshow spectators had paid for a ride in a B-17. It went down. We will have a series of live reports via News Star 4 from the scene. Also coming up, local government officials are demanding a federal investigation into the McKeesport train accident and the other derailments that have happened in the area. Plus, Paul Molitor keeps Milwaukee fans smiling. The Steelers have a Saturday night they would rather forget. And Bob has the Monday morning weather next on Action News.
Pittsburgh, this is Action News.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Beth Dolinar. There has been a plane crash in Beaver County. A World War II B-17 went down at the Beaver County Airshow earlier this evening.
50-foot embankment while landing during the Beaver County Airshow. The video you are watching is of the actual landing and crash. It was taken by an amateur photographer who was at the scene. You'll see the plane lands on one wheel, then recovers. Up to this point, it looks like the landing is good, but the plane never stops. It continues on, it goes over an embankment and crashes. 11
were firemen responding to the scene. What you are seeing is the hillside. You see some spectators from the air show there. On that hillside is where the runway was. The plane apparently was trying to land. It skidded off the runway and into the wooded area. As you can see, one man there, apparently a passenger, we can't be sure. Some were able to sit up and take their treatment. Others, like the man here being seen put into the ambulance, were very badly hurt. Again, many of them taken to area hospitals. 3 people have been listed in critical condition. They, of course, have been admitted. 6 others treated and released. Tom Randall's...
Carried out some 300 combat missions in World War II. It isn't known if the proud old warrior will ever take to the skies again. Of the 9 passengers on the plane, 6 have been treated for minor injuries and released from Beaver County Medical Center. The 2 firemen taken to the hospital were also treated and released, one for minor injuries, a second for heat exhaustion. But hospitalized in serious but stable condition at this hour.
The B-17, which is only one of 10 such planes still flying, took off with 9 passengers and 3 crew members shortly after 6 p.m. At around 6:30, as it came in for a landing, something went wrong, and it disappeared at the end of the runway instead of making a turn and returning to the terminal.
The B-17, the entire informed us it was going to land, and it came down, and it put down one wheel, like they usually do. They'll lay down one wheel and then bring the second wheel down. Well, B-17 didn't get the second wheel down until probably halfway down the field. I kept watching it, and he just went right off the end. He veered right from the main runway and went right off the end.
According to airport manager Dan Donatella, the plane, which he describes as a museum piece and priceless, did not break apart and came to rest on its belly in heavy woods on a hillside at the end of the runway. He was one of the first to arrive at the wreck and said that 12 people aboard were able to get out under their own power, although they were dazed.
It's our biggest problem right now is the fuel leaking from the aircraft. And it is secured. We have applied the chemicals in the form to it.
Despite Donatella's concern about that aviation gasoline, he feels it is being contained, that there should be no danger to creeks and streams. But the DER has been called in to assess the situation. Donatella says he doesn't know how much gasoline is still aboard, but there could be as much as 1,000 gallons. Give you an idea, this is a very large airplane. I picked up some statistics on this plane. It has a wingspan of 109 feet. It's 74 feet long. It's 19 feet high, and its weight empty is 36,000 pounds. Now, there are some houses at the end of the runway where the plane went off. We are told that those houses are not in any danger. There is not a problem with those houses. No one has had to be evacuated. I talked to the airport manager. He says that this airport is adequate to handle a plane this size, although they would like to have a larger, a longer runway. But then he says most airports would like to have a longer runway. The passengers on this plane, there were 9 of them, reportedly paid $100 apiece to take this ride. And, of course, they got a little more than they bargained for, didn't they, Vicki?
Sure, Bob, because 11 of the 9 passengers and 3 crew members were rushed to the medical center out Beaver. A hospital spokesman there gave us an update.
We have admitted 11 patients. 3 of them have been treated and released. Most of the people have minor cuts, abrasions, and bruises. We have 2 people that are still in serious condition with lacerations and internal injuries. but both of them are awake and alert.
Many of those involved in the crash waited in the emergency room and appeared to be all right, but refused to go on camera. However, Jim McRae of New Brighton, who had experience with a B-17, did tell us what it was like once the plane tried to land.
We were coming in for landing, and he braked it once, and I don't know if he overshot the runway or not. I can't tell you, but all I know that we went through the fence down into the. Did you look at the? Have you looked at the?
I heard about it.
Okay, we went down into the hill.
He said they had more problems once the plane stopped.
The biggest trouble was trying to climb that hill and get up out of there because we were fenced in, and we had to work our way over to where the airplane had crashed through to get out.
Now, the hospital has updated that serious list to include 3. Now, there are 3 serious injuries, but it could have obviously been much worse if that fuel tank had exploded. We've been told that the plane with the linking fuel tank will be taken care of tomorrow. It cannot be moved until tomorrow, as Bob Kometz told you earlier. Ron, back to you.
Vicki, are there hazmat people on the scene?
I believe they are, yes. Bob Kometz was taking care of most of that, but they were on the scene immediately.
There are all kinds of people out there, Ron. The FAA, the Civil Air Patrol, the DER has been called in. Of course, there is a concern that there is gasoline leaking into streams and that sort of thing. So there are people out there. They'll keep a watch on it overnight, and tomorrow they will move the plane.
Okay, just like McKeesport all over again. What a weekend.
It certainly is.
Federal investigators may be just a little bit. 700 evacuees.
No damage to the runway itself, so the runway's intact, and I'm told it is reopened. Now, the FAA, of course, as far as the investigation is concerned, is expected to be on the scene bright and early, first thing tomorrow morning, to determine why the vintage B-17 went off the runway in the first place. And, of course, the good news, the best news, of course, of the entire night is that many of the passengers aboard the B-17 were able to walk away from that crash on their own steam, something, of course, that does not happen as often as we'd like to see. Reporting live from the Beaver County Airport, I'm Tom Reynolds, via News Star 4. Beth?
All right, Tom, good hustle out there. And that is it for Action News at 11 o'clock tonight. We, of course, will have more tomorrow on all our newscasts about the plane crash and about that derailment in McKeesport.
KATV2 Pittsburgh. This is Eyewitness News at 6.
Good evening. Investigators now have a possible cause for that accident involving a B-17 bomber at the Beaver County Airport. This is the actual landing early last evening as the antique aircraft touched down at the Beaver County Airshow. This video you're looking at was shot by an amateur photographer. You will see the plane go off the end of the runway. Watch. There it goes. It's believed wind gusts could be responsible for the accident, which left 3 passengers hospitalized. Our Bill Flanagan is in Chippewa Township now. And Bill, do they have the plane back on the runway yet?
Well, not yet, Ray. Crew members have been waiting all day for expert assistance. A mechanic familiar with the plane had to fly up here from Florida this afternoon. He is now on the scene along with investigators from the Federal Aviation Administration trying to figure out how to get the plane back up the embankment. The flying fortress they call number 909 rests on an embankment about 100 feet below the end of the runway at Beaver County Airport. 9 passengers and 3 crew members were on board about 24 hours ago when the B-17 bomber rolled past the end of the runway upon landing.
I just couldn't figure out. I was waiting for the brakes to be applied to slow down, but nothing was happening.
Richard Greco of Beaver Falls is one of 3 passengers who remain hospitalized at Valley Medical Center. A former B-24 flight engineer, Greco had flown along for the memories.
What went through your mind as it started to go over the embankment?
I didn't know it was going over the embankment. I mean, just like I say, there was a pause there after the roll. There was a pause, and it looked like he was taking off again. All of a sudden, bang. The one fellow on the crew kept calling, "Get the hell out of here!" And we got out.
Rescue workers rushed all the passengers and 3 rescue workers to Valley Medical, where 6 of them were treated and released. This morning, investigators from the Federal Aviation Administration completed their work at the scene. Aviation Safety Inspector Kenneth Schumann says pilot Ed Lauer suspects wind conditions may have contributed to the crash.
Just basically that he got caught by a gust of wind. You know, the wind yesterday was similar to what it is right here today. It was fairly gusty in the morning.
And that could have been enough?
That could have been a possibility, yes. Just one of the areas we're looking at.
The FAA will turn over its findings to the National Transportation Safety Board. The agency has already returned the vintage bomber to its crew, who who assisted in offloading the 600 to 900 gallons of fuel believed to be on board. In addition to Greco, who is in satisfactory condition, 2 other men are in the hospital tonight. 62-year-old Samuel Holland of Beaver County and 70-year-old Charles Corella of Whiting, Indiana. Both are in serious condition. The aircraft itself is still off limits to the curious, and the Civil Air Patrol is on guard, as they have been since the accident yesterday. And they will likely stay there, Ray, until the experts can figure out how to get the plane back up on the runway.
All right, Billy, thank you very much.
Well, federal investigators have
Chance of a lifetime.
But it was a plane ride that easily could have ended the life of Tony Cantelmi. A private pilot and warplane buff, the Beaver Falls man was thrilled to be invited up in this World War II B-17 bomber. Today he relived the crash that followed, filmed by an amateur photographer at the air show and recorded on Cantelmi's VCR. Moments after the plane touched down, Cantelmi says the 9 passengers and crew of 3 knew something was wrong.
There was no braking. It didn't feel like we were, losing speed.
FAA investigators believe a gust of wind may have picked up one of the plane's wings and wheels, meaning the pilot couldn't stop. Horrified spectators watched the huge plane run off the runway and over a 100-foot embankment. But since the B-17 had no windows, Cantelmi says all the passengers knew was that the plane was sliding downward. Then they heard a loud crunch. The crash seriously injured 3 passengers, but FAA investigators say there was never any danger of explosion since the pilot shut off his fuel before going over the hill. During World War II, the B-17s earned the nickname the Flying Fortress, and investigators say this crash is proof why. The B-17 will probably have to be taken apart to get it out of there. It's possible the plane can be restored and put back into flying condition, but it's doubtful the folks who were in it last night will go back for a second ride. At the Beaver County Airport, Jenny Ferguson, Channel 11 News.
No word yet on when the plane will be removed. It's said to be one of only 11 B-17s still flying today.
Living close.
County Airshow. The question is, what caused that crash? Well, tonight the FAA is trying very hard to find out, but Greg McCampbell tells us it may take weeks before the investigation is finally complete.
If you just happen to walk up on this crash site, you'd probably get an eerie feeling that you fell through a time warp and ended up in some battle zone during World War II. B-17s just don't fall out of the sky every day. There are about 10 of the aircraft still flying around in the U.S. Security around the crash site was tight.
So what they saw over this way, there's no way. It had to be somebody that it's not supposed to be done.
The Civil Air Patrol camped out all night to keep curious onlookers away.
Listen, we have some people moving down into the perimeter, and we're going to check them out. So stand by.
Be careful. Be careful. Keeping people out was a priority, not just to keep them from disturbing the crash site, but because explosive fuel remained on board. Several things will have to be accomplished before the aircraft can be moved. Officials say they will have to defuel the plane, take all the fuel out of the aircraft, and then they'll probably have to take this plane apart piece by piece to get it out of this hollow. Crews started defueling the plane shortly after we arrived. However, it will probably take a few days before the plane can be removed.
We're still investigating, and that'll take probably a considerable amount of time yet.
FAA officials say they don't know what caused the crash, but it is not often one of these vintage airplanes are involved in mishaps during air shows. Greg McCampbell, Channel 4 Action News.
Just how safe are the nation's skies? Well, the answer to that...
The Civil Air Patrol is on guard at the Beaver County Airport, as it has been since this B-17 bomber rolled off the end of the runway during the annual air show. Pilot Edward Lawler says a crosswind kept one wing and a wheel in the air when he came into land.
You've seen the videotapes. You see the airplane is rolling smoothly on 2 wheels, and all of a sudden the wing started up, got higher and higher, and lifted the right wheel off, so I had no brake on that side because the wheel wasn't around. By the time we got the wheel back down, we didn't have room enough to stop.
And you couldn't go back up into the air?
If the attitude of the aircraft as it was, it would have been very risky to upset that fine balance by adding power. Might have made it worse.
Okay, now we're going to slide you up.
Brush cushioned the antique plane's plunge over an embankment at the end of the runway. 3 of the 9 passengers aboard are hospitalized. None of the 3 crew members was hurt. Tom Riley restored the plane for the Collings Foundation of Massachusetts.
I'm very concerned about the people that are injured. We've been dealing for 15 years in these type of airplanes. This is the first incident we've had.
Riley says although the B-17 sustained severe damage, it can be restored again. Once the work begins, it could take a week or more to dismantle this B-17 and ship it in parts back to Florida. Then restoration can begin. a project that could take a year or two. In Beaver County, Bill Flanagan, KDKA-TV, Eyewitness News Update.
Outside.
This wind shear or a heavy gust picked the right wing up so that the right wheel was not on the runway. As a result, the runway ran out of length and we went over the bank.
Ed Lawler is a World War II Navy pilot with over 28,000 flying hours and 8 years flying this B-17 that crashed while landing during an air show yesterday at the Beaver County Airport. When the wind picked up his wing and right landing gear, he had no control over the aircraft except possibly to ground loop it and risk the lives of spectators at the air show. 2 of the 9 who were aboard remain in serious condition tonight at the medical center in Beaver. Sam Holland, 62 of Beaver, and Charles Corella, 70 of Whiting, Indiana. Both are expected to recover. The Flying Fortress is a relic of World War II. It was built in 1945, too late to see any combat, but it is a popular attraction at air shows all over the nation and is owned by the Collings Trust of Massachusetts. Tom Riley of Vintage Aircraft restored it originally at his Florida headquarters, and he's got the job of restoring it again.
The airplane can be rebuilt. It's not totally damaged. It'll cost a substantial amount of money to rebuild it.
Normally, the B-17, a workhorse bomber over the skies of Europe between 1942 and 1945, needs only 1,700 feet for its landing roll. The Beaver runway is 4,500 feet. And what was the pilot thinking as he ran out of runway?
I was trying to figure out how to get it stopped.
Back in World War II, when the missions were heavy and the planes were scarce, this Flying Fortress would probably be back in the air in a matter of weeks. But times have changed. The healing powers of Tom Riley are expected to take a year at the least, maybe 2 at the most. In Beaver County, I'm Dave Kelly, Channel 11 News, Night Beat.
Beaver County Airshow to overshoot a runway last night. As crews worked to remove fuel from the historic World War II plane today, investigators were saying the winds may have made it difficult for the pilot to brake. When the plane overshot the runway at 6:45 last night, 9 passengers on board were injured. None of the crew members suffered any injuries, but 3 firefighters did. Only 3 passengers had to be admitted to the hospital. 2 were in serious condition.